right, cool. Let me go ahead and share my computer real quick, and then we'll navigate today's topic. And again, this is going to be a little bit more of a hands-on class participation. I want to make sure that all of us are all on the same page here, that we are, let me see, it's not, for some reason it's not coming up. Let me share my computer. Yeah, all right. You guys see my my computer? I get a thumbs up or a yes?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it, sir.
No problem.
All right, so this topic, I'm going to try to dive in really deep into it. I mean, the current purchase agreement has 32, 34 paragraphs on it, okay? And the importance of this form, it's really, you know, the driving vessel of what we do, why we got into real estate is to negotiate these contracts. So the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions is basically what it says. This is hand on hand. When you open escrow, it'll provide you with the necessary information that coincides with escrow. So that's the reason escrow has put this, or the California Association of Realtors has put this information on the car forms, so that way it goes hand on hand, side by side, okay? Now, the RPA is really defines and really gives you a good understanding and the dynamics of why real estate is the funnest platform to be in, because it gives you information and who to protect, the buyer, the seller, and also the agents involved. Now, I've seen, and I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory because I see a lot of people here that are fairly new, or I have not done an introduction. I've been in real estate for 24 years. I'm a licensed real estate broker. I'm also the team leader for KW South Bay and a broker as well. So I have two titles with the role. And prior to me being a team leader, I was the broker of record for many, many years. I was a compliance officer, and I dealt with the complexity, but the understanding of litigations, arbitrations, and what we hate to hear is lawsuits. Even though I was not involved in the transaction and representing the buyer or the seller, it didn't matter because I was the broker. Guess what? I was also named on some of these complaints. So what I want to really dive in today is really give you a good understanding on how to draft an efficient, but more so a good approach and how to navigate these purchase agreement. Now, here's the bottom line and how I see purchase agreements, disclosures, and any of the documents that is provided by the California Association of Realtors. One, do not, bend the rules. Do not take shortcuts. And more so, try not to strike information from these forms, okay? I see this quite often where agents want to change things, and the listing agent or the buyer's agent want to change stuff in the information that you have already. Avoid as much as you possibly can, folks, okay? That's what gets a lot of agents in trouble, is when we start modifying these agreements. Now, the cool part of it is that if there is instructions from the buyer and from the seller that they say, well, you know what, I want this off, I want to negotiate this, then this is coming straight from your principals, your buyers and your sellers, okay? But it should never be the advice of the individual agent navigating and giving legal advice, and more so trying to change these contracts. Because then what happens is the buyer or the seller will come back and say, well, it was because of Simon, it was because of, Simon's guidance that now we're in a pickle. Okay, so if you can avoid that, then please, please, please always seek the advice of your broker, and more so if you need to get your legal team involved, then bring the legal team as well. In most of our market centers, we have the legal representation that we can reach out and ask for legal advice. Okay, so I'm putting out that disclaimer when it comes to any of the contracts, and more so the listing agreement when you do represent a seller, and more so the buyer's purchase agreement, because this is the one that ultimately gets a lot of people in sticky situations by terms, price, and conditions. And then when someone breaches the contract, then that's where the momentum of complaints and eventually litigation happens. Now, if there is a avenue where someone is going to file a complaint, or more so a lawsuit, then we need to, as a company and as a real estate agents, we need to take 2 steps back, let the buyer and the seller dispute whatever. We do not get involved in the chaos of that, because then we're liable as well. And we always, you know, ask that the buyer or the seller please get representation, so that way the attorney can legally advise them on what best practice and best approach. All right, so I'm just throwing that disclaimer out there for all of you that are on the call this afternoon. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being on the call. So before I get started, let me, why is this not building momentum here? So, oh, here it is. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, and then feel free as we go through the lecture, if you have any questions, raise your hand or just say, hey, Simon, I have a question. You know, can you explain this a little bit more in detail? Or more so, just say, hey, I'm not sure what you are stating. Can you repeat it, or can you give us a little bit more clarity? Now, sometimes I go 100 miles, and please forgive me, you know, because sometimes all that information is already embedded in my head, but I believe that everyone on this call already knows the answer to the questions, okay? So again, please make sure that you ask tons of questions because it helps you, but it more so helps me, and it may help someone else on the call as well, okay? So the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instruction, this is the newest revision of the contract, which is December 2018. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Come December, this entire RPA is going to be completely different. It's not even going to look like this on the first page or the second page. Now, right now, the RPA, I believe, is 12 pages. Let me just double check. And it goes on and on and on and on. So, okay. So right now we have 10 pages, just the RPA, folks, okay? Not your AD form, not your possible representation agreement, not your wire fraud, just the RPA. Guess what? The new RPA is going to be 18 pages long, 18. So they added additional forms, 8 additional forms to it. Not fun, not exciting, but that's okay. You know what? We progress as the forms, and there's always 2 updates every year. There's one in December and the other one in June. So keep that in mind when you know, you've been doing this for quite some time. It's always been two times per year that they change or revise, modify the purchase agreement. Okay. So let's go back to the RPA. Now, can everyone hear me okay? Because I can't see anyone, I just can see the people that are in my class. Let's see. Can I get a thumbs up just to make sure everyone can hear me? Okay, perfect, thank you. I have to do sound checks just in case, guys, because I've been rumbling for a few minutes and it was like, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. So we're going to try to make it as interactive as possible, guys. You know, this stuff, unfortunately, I have to admit, is a little dry, a little boring, okay? But this is also your avenue to really understand how this form really works, but more so, this is what brings you money. These forms is what brings you money, ladies and gentlemen. This is the form that allows you to submit an offer, negotiate the terms, open escrow, go through your fiduciary responsibility for your clients, and then ultimately your buyers close the deal and collect a commission. So this is a form that you really need to understand, but more so put part of your arsenal of tools. Now, a lot of you probably don't know, I'm a former police officer. And one of the things that I learned as a rookie in law enforcement was keep copies of all the reports. So meaning that if it was a 187 or 288 or 2550, these were forms and penal code sections that, you know, we would have to write reports. Now, my FTO, my field training officer, he would always say, you know, keep an arsenal. Even when I was in the academy, and even before I even went out in patrol, when I was working the county jails, they would emphasize and stress the fact to keep a 3-ring binder of all the reports that you have, because you can go back. You can go back to your forms and really see, okay, this is how you do this specific report. This is how you do that specific report. Now, I'm going to stress the fact that I'm old school, okay, 24 years when I started, you know, the dynamics was a lot different than what it is now. Technology has definitely defined and how we do business now, which is cool, which is fun, which is exciting. But, you know, it also, you got to roll up your sleeves and understand how to approach these agreements. How do you make it a win-win for all parties? Remember, when you think that you have the upper advantage, you lose. When the listing agent believes that they have the upper advantage, they lose. It should be a two-way street, meaning it should be a give and take, okay? This is the way that the most successful real estate agents end up closing more and more deals, is because they know how to give and take, okay? This is not about the King Kong effect, the ego involved in your, you know, years of experience or knowledge of these contracts. It's really, what is it for your clients, not what is it for me. And don't look at it from a perspective that, okay, I'm collecting a commission, which you're making very good money on these transactions, especially if you hit, you know, your 6, 7, 8 $2 million properties, then obviously the commission percentage goes up and the commission checks are pretty decent as well. But remember, at the end of the day, it's not about the agents, it's not about the lender, it's not about title or escrow, it's about the buyer and the seller. They're the ultimate decision makers when it comes to these contracts, meaning whatever direction that the seller wants, we have to abide if we represent the seller. Whatever the buyer decides, then that's the discretion we need to. What if the buyer wants to cancel? Okay. Now we can have conversations and alter that conversation to say, look, it's to your advantage to continue with this process because you will be in breach of your contract and there's no guarantee that you will be able to retain your deposit. And that may be at the end of escrow where the buyer has released all conditions. And I'm going to give you some little tidbits here as well on what you should be looking at when it comes to the RPA and why it's very important to understand your position and more so time. What are the time aligned with these offers? Okay, because we also have contingencies. And that's another very important element and rule to understand is contingency periods, because that really defines the buyer's position and also the seller's position. And I want to make sure that you're crystal clear in any of your position if you represent the seller and what the seller must do, or when representing the buyer and what the agent must do when representing a buyer. Now, remember, it's a finesse, it's a dance, okay? Remember, when you build a good relationship with the other agent, then you're already one step ahead of the game. Why? Because if something does end up going sideways, then at least you have the conversational aspect of saying, hey, Jacob, hey, Robin, you know, we're in escrow and, you know, we have a little bit of dilemma, but because I build that rapport and that relationship with the listing agent, then guess what? They're going to work as hard as well to make this a win for all of us to continue and progress and then ultimately close the transaction. And that's the key, folks, okay? Because I hate to say it, the number one thing why agents fail and end up canceling is because the ego gets the best of them. And I want you to stop. I want you to at least smell the flowers, okay? You know, anything and everything, because you're looking at it from a bigger perspective, okay? It's not about you. It's not about the agent. It's about the individuals that are buying or selling, okay? Everyone on the same page, everyone understands their dynamics and their position, okay? Can I get a yes? Okay, awesome. All right, so page 1 is really the 2 pages of the RPA. I'm not going to go streamline because this is probably like a 6-hour class, literally. And I'll probably end up doing a 6-hour class one day, but not today, okay? I'm going to streamline this as much as I can and jam-pack it in a hour session, okay? I might go just a little bit more, but I want you to just get the logistics and a good barrier of understanding of how this form works, okay? And it's all progression. The more you do, the better you get at it, okay? Practice, practice, practice. For someone that is new in the industry, doesn't write enough offers, then you must practice, 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 okay? As I said earlier on, okay? A lot of my stuff was report writing. I didn't like it. I was never good at it, but I kept practicing, practicing, practicing. There's 3 things that I always emphasize when someone is getting into real estate is 1, understand contracts, understand negotiations, and understand objection handlers, okay? Those are the 3 fundamental principles that if you really want to make a difference and understand and stay in the long run in real estate, then learn those 3 dynamics. Real estate contracts, purchase agreements, addendums, disclosures, listing agreements, and all the forms that the California Association has to provide. Now, a lot of the information that is part of your member services doesn't pertain and you'll probably never use, but it's there as a resource and it's there if you end up getting a deal. Let's say you get a business opportunity, a vacant land or commercial, retail, a mixed use, or maybe a multifamily, okay? All these forms are there for your benefit. And the more you plug in, the better you're gonna get at it, okay? So understand contracts. Number 2, understand negotiations. I think I just clearly said that. It's a finesse, it's a dance, okay? Remember, it's not about you winning or the other agent. And if I sound very repetitive, it's because that's what you need to embed in your head, okay? Understand the dynamics of it and you will always win in these processes or transactions, okay? Any questions so far? We're all good? Awesome, okay, let's continue. And then number 3, obviously, seller objections, okay? Why is that very important? Well, you're gonna be throwing a lot of objection handlers, buyer objections, seller objection. How do you navigate and understand it? This is very important, role playing, and then actually, getting these samples of objection handlers. Why? Because the better you are at handling objections, the better of maneuvering and controlling and helping navigate the buyer and also the seller to the home stretch, closing the deal and getting a commission. That's the end goal, folks, okay? But at the end, there's times that deals do not go through, and that's perfectly fine. Now, it's not fun and it's not pleasant and it's hard to spend all the time that you did showing properties, navigating these offers, not getting your offers accepted, and then you get one offer that does get accepted, but then it falls out of escrow because the buyer decides to back out. Okay, that's never fun. Never fun. Okay, so again, it's knowing how to roll up your sleeves and really diving deep and understanding your position. Now, if it's not, my class, take advantage of classes that are in relationship to contract. 1, the California Association of Realtors will be having tons of classes on the new RPA, okay? Take full advantage of it. Your associations should also be having, the classes on the RPA. Also, your office, if it's not your broker or your market center, should also be providing you with classes on the contract. Now, all the technology is fun and dandy, and it's a way to leverage yourself. But here, if you don't understand contracts, then it defeats the purpose of why you're marketing yourself. You're getting all these leads, but you don't know and understand the dynamics of the offers, okay? So that's what I'm here to kind of educate and provide you some resolution for you to get a better understanding. So the first 2 pages of the RPA are the most crucial of everything. When a listing agent receives an offer, those are the 2 pages that they look at. They look at the first page and they look at the second page because both of those pages really give you the meats and potatoes, all the core of all the information. Now, I'm not saying just focus on the 2 pages, focus on the entire RPA, because sometimes buyer's agents will throw little curveballs, okay? And will throw little jabs. And if it's an oversight on your part and now you're in escrow, well, it's a bona fide agreement, it's an executed agreement. And therefore, we have to abide by those terms of the agreement. So this is why I have to caution you that when you are submitting offers, that you understand your role and your position, but also if you are representing the seller, understand that you must dissect this form and look at every paragraph to make sure that you don't miss any items. Fair enough? Okay. So page 1, you're going to put the date, okay, which is the date that you create this form, all right? Usually is the date that you started, which is August 17. Okay, the offer, very self-explanatory. Who is the buyer? Okay, who is your buyers? Okay, if there's more than one buyer, then you put the second buyer. Okay, I'm just being funny. Okay. All right, then you're going to put the address of the subject property. You should have that. If you're looking at the MLS, obviously you're not going to submit an offer on something that the buyers are not interested. Okay, and you're going to put the offer as, I'm going to use the city of Torrance as an example. This is just an example, guys, okay? Don't go looking for a 123 ABC Sesame Street and think, is that where Big Bird is at, okay? I'll chop your hands off. Just kidding. All right, I'm going to throw little jabs and sense of humor here, guys. All right. Please don't take it personal. All right. We got to make it interactive, but we got to make it fun as well. All right. What's the price you guys want to make an offer on? Okay. Just throw a number. 1 million? 5 million. All right, we got 1 million. Is that 1 million? No, that's 100,000. We've got to add another zero.
Yeah, 100 million.
Okay, 100 million, what happened here? Let's go back. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Why don't we just do 10 million?
Yeah,
all
10
right?
million. Yeah.
10 million. You just making an offer on a $10 million property. That's awesome.
I'll take that.
Escrow, okay? This is, again, you have 2 options. You can either put a specific time, which is a specific date like say August 30th, which is obviously a little too soon, but then we can move this to September and we can say September 30th. We can be specific, or we can just say, you know what, I'm just going to round it up and I'm just going to say it's going to be a 30-day escrow. And for the most part, the majority of transactions that I see are usually 30 to 45 days. And either or is perfectly fine, but I'm just telling you what I see is, you know, a 30-day, 45-day. All right. The next is obviously the confirmation. Here's where you're going to put selling means buyer's agent, okay? This is the buyer's agent's information. And obviously, you're going to put here the firm. So it'll be Keller Williams South Bay as an example. Okay, you're going to put in the corporate license, whatever that corporate license is. And then you're going to also put your information as well. Okay, here is on the bottom is where you're going to put in your information and then obviously your license number. Who do you represent? You represent the seller, represent the buyer, it doesn't matter, okay? For the sake of today, I'm just gonna put, as I mentioned, those names. We'll go here and then we'll go here, okay? And then we'll just throw in some quick numbers here and here. All right, so we now have this information. Now, it's very crucial and very important that you look through these forms and dissect what is pertinent and what is not pertinent. And then also what you got to look at is, you know, how is it going to portray with the listing agent? Okay. Remember, this is no different than a resume. And you have very seasoned listing agents out there that will dissect this And they'll know if you are doing this correctly or incorrectly. And now, remember, rule of the thumb is you want to complete this as much as you possibly can. The more, the better. But there's certain things that just do not pertain to the offer. Therefore, it's not necessary to add any additional information. And I'll explain as we go. Okay, but this is important right here, the confirmation of agents that are involved in this. Okay, who is the buyer's agent? Who is the buyer's agent's company? And then the listing agent's company and listing agent's name. And if all this information you can find straight from the multiple listing service. Okay, any questions? All right, let's continue. Finance terms. Okay, number 3 is what is the initial deposit? Now, technically speaking, the rule of thumb is 3%. So if we do the arithmetic on a $10 million, what is 3% of that? Anyone?
300,000.
300,000. All right, big number, right? Huge number. Now, 3%, and why that number is crucial is because that's the amount that a seller can go after for damages. 3% of the purchase agreement. Okay, write that down, put some notations, put it in your head, put it in your memory. 3% is the total amount that a seller can go after for damages. Now, again, most savvy listing agents will ask on a counteroffer to say, you know, buyer to deposit 3% of the purchase price. Now, they're also going to look at the buyer's financials and look at, you know, proof of funds. If they don't have the proof of funds, then most likely, if it's a competitive where there's multiple offers, they're probably not going to consider this as a potential runner-up in getting a counteroffer. So again, conversations will lead to an understanding of what the seller's position is. You should be reaching out to the listing agent and asking tons of questions. How many offers? What is the highest offer you have on table? How soon is the seller going to make a decision? You know, what is the position of the seller? What are they moving to another state? Are they moving local? Do they need to rent back the property, meaning that they need to stay in possession for a certain period of time in order for them to, you know, make this deal work and then consider your offer. So those are, again, some of the dynamics that you need to understand. Now, the initial deposit is already embedded that it's wired into escrow. If you read, it says buyer's direct deposit, buyer shall deliver deposit directly to the escrow holder by electric funds. If the buyer is going to go in a different direction, then you can check off if they're going to put a cashier's check, personal check, or any other type of way. You can also say they may come in with cash, okay? Cash money, all right? Now, I don't know how too many people that are just gonna walk in a briefcase or a duffel bag with 300,000 in their bag and deposit this to escrow, but who knows? You know what? Nothing surprises me, and I've seen some crazy dynamics in real estate that nothing really surprises me. But again, 300,000 on a $10 million purchase price is the minimum 3% that you'll end up depositing. Okay, any questions? Okay. Now, a lot of this stuff is you're gonna bypass, you're not gonna really need, and you'll know as you progress, you know, and you can always ask your market center, hey, can you provide us with some samples of you know, purchase agreements that we've had that were canceled, that never went and closed? And usually your market center will provide you with cancel offers that you can use as a base, but more so as a foundation to kind of see the dynamics of every price point, what are some of the terms and conditions, and what information has the buyer put into these contracts to make it work or not make it work, okay? Section number 2, 3A2, buyer deposit with an agent buyer has given the deposit to personal check. That's not a practice any longer, so you can bypass this, okay? Increased deposit, here it is, folks. When you are on a competitive market, when you're dealing with multiple buyers, you may want to stimulate this offer to attract the seller to look at your offer or consider your offer. Now, an increased deposit is usually anything above what your deposit is already. Remember, we already indicated that it's 300,000, which is the deposit, but let's just say that they want to make this aggressive and maybe they have a deal that they're closing and they're waiting for some proceeds of that sale of their home to put into their down payment on this new home. So you'll say, okay, once we get the executed offer accepted, within 15 days of that day, I will put in an additional 200,000, okay? And that works because now what does that show to the listing agent and the seller? It shows good faith, it shows aggressiveness, it shows that the buyer is motivated and the buyer is very interested in the property. Why? Because they're putting 500,000 of deposit into escrow, okay? Which now, this is only a deposit. This is not a money that's forfeited to the seller if the buyer does the right thing, right? Cancels within a time period and goes through the motions of their due diligence and then decides to back off. And we're going to explain that more on paragraph 14B of the purchase agreement that really positions your client, your buyer, of how you can back out of the deal, right? Back out of the deal and ultimately get your offer canceled and retain the buyer's deposit. Okay, 1 second here.
Simon, on that, would that
Make
be
sure that
counted
I'm
as
not missing anyone.
would that extra money be counted as a contingency?
Bear with me
Yeah,
momentarily. I
down
just want to
payment.
make sure I don't have anyone waiting on the waiting room. Okay, cool. All right, and remember, ask a lot of questions. So I have a question here. Yes, Jacob.
So what why would they do that if they're gonna submit the down payment fairly soon after acceptance?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So I don't know if you heard Jacob. He says, what is the benefit of actually adding additional deposit if they're already going to put a down payment towards the purchase of their property pretty soon? The answer is, because you want to get your offer considered. Now, remember, just because your offer gets accepted doesn't mean it's going to close in 30 days. The buyer can still back out and the seller can still back out if the buyer breaches the contract. But the reason the buyer puts an additional deposit, what we call increased deposit, is to entice and also to show that the buyer is motivated enough that they want this. They're being aggressive in their position. Maybe they don't have the means right now to put the 300,000, or excuse me, the additional 200,000 because they're waiting for extra money to come from a closing of their home, closing on an investment property, money wire from out of state or out of the country. But they want to show a strong position. It's really just that position to be a strong competitor. Because when you get 3 offers and all these offers have less of a deposit, then what it shows us, the listing agent and the seller, is that buyer doesn't have a lot of skin in the game. The more skin in the game, the more aggressive the buyer is, the more likelihood that the seller may consider this guy is for reals, wants to get their offer considered and accepted. So let's go with that, because now there's some money in the table that the seller can go after if the buyer breaches and releases all contingencies. Okay. It's more skin in the game for the seller, and it looks more enticing. That way, if you're representing the seller and the seller's you're the listing agent and talking to your seller, you're saying, look, Jacob's offer here, is pretty aggressive. They offered, the asking price of $10 million. They're putting, the 3%, but in 15 days from now, they're also going to put an additional 200,000 on top of their down payment. They seem very motivated. We should at least consider their offer.
And Simon?
Not very common. No, it's in there, and I just wanted to let everyone know it's not very common right now to see initial deposit, but it's there as a resource if you have to play that card. Remember, contracts is like poker, okay? You got to have that poker face. And obviously, at the end, it may surprise you, but if you win on this poker game, then you're probably going to get your offer and your terms considered than someone that cannot hold that composure and not play that poker face. So that's the whole intent of the increased deposit. But it's far and few, guys. It doesn't really happen that often, all right? If it's an all cash offer, which is always the fun part, is that you have a client that isn't all cash. Yeah, imagine if you have a client that is in for 10 million and they have $10 million to play with. That's a good day because it eliminates a lot of the red tape, right? All the finance, the appraisal, and all the stuff that comes with financing. So for the sake of today's lecture, we're going to say that it is a finance. And now we got to determine what the amount that they're willing to finance. Now, the price on the top, which is the 10 million there, right? And the bottom number should always match, which is section G as in George. Now, whatever you do in between the purchase price and the purchase price total, it will vary on how much money the buyer will come into escrow to close this deal. So you got to understand the arithmetic and understand the mathematical equation and how to calculate this, because if this number down here, the $10 million is off, then your arithmetic is wrong, okay? So right now we said that the buyer is putting 300,000. The buyer in 15 days will also put in an additional 200. Now section D as in David, okay, D as in David, loan, that's going to be what the amount that the buyer will be financing of the actual purchase agreement. What is that amount? Okay, that can be any amount. Let's just say that they're going to finance, I don't know, $5 million. Oh, that's wrong. See, my equation is going to be, now here's one thing. If you do that, it's going to have these little sections here. That means that the arithmetic is wrong. So 5. Okay, there you go. All right, so with the 300,000 and the 200, they're financing 5 million, I should say, of the 10 million, guys. All right, so now what the buyer has to come in the table to close this transaction is the $4.5 million. Well, how did you calculate this? Well, the system calculates it for you. So what it does, it knows that the purchase price is $10 million, right? It knows that you are putting a $300 deposit. It knows that you will also be including a $200,000 deposit. It knows that the balance finance is $5 million. Then it knows that the buyer at the end, closer to closing this, buyer will have to come in with a $4.5 million to make this work. And this number stays the same, okay? So if you do the arithmetic on this, 5, okay, and then 3 and 2 is 500,000, and then 4.5 million equals 5 million. So 5 million down, and then 5 million finance. So a total of 50%. That's what the loan is, 50% of the 10 million.
Hey, Simon,
is that a good buyer or is that a bad buyer? A buyer that's coming in with 50% down.
That's a good buyer.
It's a great buyer, right? It's a buyer that has the capital, has the means, and has the ability to close this deal. This to me is a great buyer that's coming in with a very strong position. And again, this is an offer that I would definitely encourage the seller to look at and make a decision if they would accept or at least counter this. Now, part of the section D is the first loan. There's also the loan will be, it's already defaulted into a conventional finance, but it also has the option to go FHA. It also has the option to go VA, which is your veteran military personnel. to get a loan. And then you can also include seller financing as well, okay? I'm not gonna go too much into the seller finance, but that form is pretty intense, but it's more if the seller is willing to finance the buyer with additional. And I'll probably have a class on how to navigate seller financing because it's a very cool concept, but more so it's a great way to leverage and be able to get the buyer more of a home in a desirable area, because now we can use the seller as a bank and the seller willing to come in and help with financing a percentage of the purchase price. Okay. Any questions so far?
I just have one question. I'm trying to understand. I get the 500,000.
Right, cool. Now, if there's a second loan, which right now we're not seeing too many second loans. If there is a second loan from a traditional bank, then let's say that first Guild Mortgage is the first position, and Guild Mortgage is also doing a second loan for 100%. You know, we saw those in the very beginning of 2002, 2003, all the way into the market crash in 08. Then you can utilize a second loan as an example where they're financing the first, which could be $5 million, and then they're financing the second for another $5 million to make that deal work. Now it's very rare, and we're not seeing too many offers right now. All right, so I don't think he can hear your question. Hold on one second. Can you guys hear me okay? Not you in the group in here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you. Okay, great. Sorry, guys. It's hard for me when I'm looking at the presentation. I cannot see. Oh, I can't. Let me see. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was just trying to understand. Okay, he got the 5 million down to 500,000. I mean, the 5 million loan. Okay, so how much? Or so are they what? Okay, is the balance 4.5? Is that what the balance is? Is that?
Yes. So, yeah. So let me explain it in a way that maybe it'll make more sense. I don't want to
jump too far ahead, but I was just trying to say.
No, it's perfectly fine, and I'm glad you're asking this question. How we calculated the 4.5 that the buyer, remember, Section F says balance of down payment or purchase price in the amount of, that means what is the amount that the buyer would have to bring into escrow to close this deal and wrap it up. How we calculated that was based on two factors, the deposit and also the finance aspect of it. Because if we were to change this and say, well, you know what, not 5 million, but we're gonna go with 900, oh, excuse me, 9 million, let's say that as an example, then I think the numbers are gonna be off. Then that's gonna change the trajectory of this offer, because now the buyer is financing 9 million, that's the loan that they're getting, but they're also putting 500,000 as part of their initial deposit and down payment. So that's the down payment of 500,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, I got it, yeah.
Okay, so this number right here on loan will alter and change the trajectory of what and how much that the buyer will have to bring into the table. So if we go back to, let's just say, $1 million, my bad, I always had too many. So let's just say 900,000, 1, 2, 3, okay? So let's say that they're financing 900,000. That's a very small loan. That means that they're bringing to the table 8.6 million of down payment, which is your 500, your 300,000, and your 200, and then the rest of the money, which is the 8.6, into escrow to close this deal. And then their mortgage payment will be based on a $900,000 amount.
Got it.
Okay, great question. Thank you. I can hear you guys now, so thank you. Thank you. I had my mute button because I have not just my laptop, but I also have the television here on, and it echoes, and that's why I put it on mute. All right, additional finance. These are for your clients that are FHA or VA or need a little bit of assistance. If that's the case, then you can actually put here that the buyer's requesting that the seller provide with some closing costs as an example. Now, this is where you put additional finance terms, guys, okay? This is where you're gonna put that information. Let's just say, for example, that the buyer is asking for, you know, $20,000 of closing costs as an assistance. Then here is where you would put buyers requesting, right? Buyers requesting, I apologize, trying to type and talk at the same time. Buyers requesting, you know, maybe 2% of buyers closing cost, as an example. All right. And what this shows is that we are asking the seller for some type of credit. And right now, because it's still a seller's market, not really a buyer's market, it's going to be very unlikely that the seller will contribute to 2.5% of closing costs. But again, can the buyers request that if they do not have sufficient funds for the down payment and closing costs? Because remember, this is only calculating the down payment. We still got to factor in closing costs. And your closing costs range from 1.8 to 2% of the actual purchase price. So for the sake of argument, let's just say on a $10 million purchase price, 1.8%, that's about $180,000. That's substantial, okay? But usually with these type of offers in the multi-million, you're not gonna see really much of assistance. This is more of your lower tier buyers, your first-time home buyers, your FHA 3.5%, your VA 0 down payments, the ones that have enough to scrape for a down payment, but they don't have enough closing costs in order for them to make the deal stick. So they ask for assistance. They ask the sellers for assistance, and that's where you can put in that request. Any questions? All right.
Simon,
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Do we always submit the pre-approval or the proof of funds with the purchase agreement?
Absolutely, thank you. So part of the initial, remember, it's like going on an interview, okay? The interview and the resume is the crucial. If you can get through the first stage, which is your offer, then your offer being accepted, it's like going into the motions of an interview. You submit your resume, now they're gonna dissect that resume. They're gonna say, okay, this one we'll consider, this one, no, 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 no. Now the offer should also be similar to a resume. Part of your requirement. Now I strictly always mention and will always tell you is look at what the MLS states. The MLS on agent remarks will tell you what the requirements are. If they only ask for an offer, then just send the offer. If they ask for the pre-qual letter, then send the pre-qual letter. If they ask for proof of funds, then send out proof of funds. If they're asking for DU approval, that's underwriting approval, and guess what? You're going to send the DU approval as well as part of the condition and overall position. Because remember, you want to satisfy the listing agent's needs. And you may have a listing agent that is very demanding and very detail-oriented, that they want it at a specific way. And if you send it out, you know, missing items, empty spaces, not the right paperwork, they're going to say, well, if that's the case right now, how is that going to look like when we're in escrow? Is he or she going to be efficient and professional through the entire process? But remember, it's always reading, you know, between the line, and look at the multiple listing service and see the agent remark and say, okay, they're requesting that we submit the offer, the pre-qualifying letter, or the pre-approval letter with proof of funds to close this deal. Then a buy. Some may even ask for credit scores or FICO scores, okay? So if they're asking for FICO scores and your clients are fine with divulging that information, then by all means send it. Okay, now when it comes to bank information or social security or anything very personal, then do not scratch it off. Like bank statements, erase the account information or block it or do something to avoid that information being divulged. Because remember, it's not just the offer being sent an email, it's being sent out to the listing agent, to the seller, and who knows if something may happen where someone else can get that information. So be cautious and understand your position that if you get any personal stuff, social security, date of birth, or account information, you block it off. Okay. Great question. Any other questions as we continue? All right, so section 2, remember, as I said earlier, the two most important documents in the RPA is the first page and the second, because that's where it has most of the content that really defines the buyer and also the seller. It has the terms, it has the price, it has the close of escrow, it has the down payment, and it has closing costs as well, but it also has, you know, some of the conditions, you know, buyer loan contingency, appraisal contingencies, okay? And here it is, page 2. Verification of down payment. You know, the buyer ultimately has three days to provide the seller with verification of the down payment. Now, this is 3 days, not 3 business days, but 3 calendar days. So if this happens to be on a Thursday, all right, on a Thursday, that means by Sunday, you must provide a verification of the down payment and closing costs, meaning that the buyer has to provide some type of proof of funds that they have enough in their bank account to qualify, but more so to close this deal. Make sense? Now, a lot of this stuff is already embedded in default, okay? The default amount is 3 days. You can modify that and you can do 1 day. You can do 5 days. Now, remember, anytime you modify this, what are you doing? You're putting the seller and the listing agent on notice that you did some modifications, okay? And those modifications will be a counter offer, okay? Now, it would be great that all the terms are accepted by the seller, but in essence, some of them aren't. That's where a counter offer comes into place. That's where you need to send out a seller counteroffer to determine what additional terms is the seller indicating in the offer. And we're going to leave it as is. We're going to say that the offer is already verified, and we're going to check that the verification is attached. All right, so you just check verification of attached. Now, section 9 talks about the appraisal contingent, and I need to stress this important statement here or paragraph, because this is where a lot of agents tend to get themselves into trouble, okay? So the appraisal contingency and removal, so it's a 2-part paragraph. It's that it's the appraisal and it's also the removal of that contingency. So the agreement is or is not contingent upon a written appraisal of the property by a licensed or certified appraiser, and no less than the purchase price. Seller shall, as specified in paragraph 14B3 in writing, which is either move forward or release that as a condition, remove that appraisal condition, or cancel this agreement within 17 days. Now, I'm going to stress also the importance of timelines. It's usually 3/5/17/21. 3/5/17/21. Those are usually the numbers that are embedded into the contract. 3 days to provide the proof of funds, 3 days to deposit the deposit into escrow, 5 days for the seller to send the seller disclosures, 17 days to release appraisal, physical inspections, disclosures, and 21 days to release appraisal contingencies. Now, I know this information because it's already embedded in my head. You're going to take time, it's going to take progression, and it's going to take you to submit offers, get offers accepted, and more so going through the transaction process to understand all the elements of timelines that these forms have. And these are important because this is what causes lawsuits, guys. when the buyer breaches the contract, when the seller breaches the contract, okay? So keep that in mind when looking at your position. What elements are you at? Are you ready to release that or not? Now, I have to stress and emphasize that if you release a contingency, it's like a wall. Every wall that you release, the seller will be going after that deposit. Let's say that the deposit is my left fist, and there's walls that protect that deposit. Every time a seller or a buyer requests the release of a condition, it's putting the seller closer and closer and closer to this deposit. Once the buyer releases any and all contingencies, and guess what, ladies and gentlemen, the seller can go after the full deposit and retain it. So you got to be very, very, very careful in your position, guys. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So you never want to check off not contingent only if it's a cash offer. But even cash offers, I've seen that buyers may still want to get an appraisal done. That it's an all cash deal. So ask your client in their approach and how they want. But for the most part, if they're financing, even if it's 50%, 60% down payment, you still want to make sure that you protect your client in case the property doesn't appraise, because the lender is still going to request an appraisal to be done. So I just want you to understand. Now, what are we seeing a lot going on right now in real estate? We're seeing a lot of issues with appraisal contingency, guys. Okay, we're seeing a lot of buyers releasing that as part of the agreement. They're literally submitting an offer with the offer contingency release. What does that mean? What does that show? What does that entail? What if the appraisal doesn't come in at full asking of $10 million? Because that's the minimum the appraisal has to come in. Because if they're financing, the lender may not finance the 10 million, the buyer may have to come in with more down payment to make the difference. What if the appraisal comes in at 7 million and you made an offer of 10 million? You're now $3 million discrepancy here. So you got to work a avenue of negotiations with the seller. But if you release this as a condition, folks, then you're basically exposing yourself that you cannot come back and say, well, you know what, it appraised at 7 million. We're asking for you to reduce your purchase at 7 instead of 10 million. Well, the listing agent and the seller will say, well, wait a minute, you released that as a condition. Therefore, you got to have to come in with the difference. Now, and looking at the bigger picture, and I've seen disputes this way. Remember, it's the song and dance. You navigate and make it a win-win. Yes, I understand that the appraisal was released, but I didn't realize that the appraisal amount was going to be that significantly low. I thought maybe 500,000, 800,000, but $3 million is a lot of money on top of what I'm already putting down in the closing costs, and an additional 3 million. It's just not going to fly. Unfortunately, we do not have the means to. Therefore, if the seller does not want to bend, then ultimately we have to cancel. Now, you can come back.
Simon?
Sure.
As a fiduciary to the client or the principal, would you recommend in a situation like that you might want to walk away from this deal for their protection?
Buyer, walk away?
Yeah, the buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. If the seller is not willing to bend and not willing to work with you, then yes, by all means, you're not going to have a deal. Right. If the seller is being very sticky about it and very not willing to bend, then unfortunately, that's the case. If you held on to that contingency, then guess what? The buyer has every right to exercise paragraph 14B as stated on the section of I. Okay, so absolutely. If they cannot work a deal, then by all means, the buyer can definitely cancel, and the buyer has the right to retain their full deposit back.
Okay,
yes.
So I never recommend that they give up their rights to contingencies. Never sign a document.
That is correct. That is correct. All right, thank you. Great question. Does it look bad if the buyer doesn't agree to remove appraisal? No, not necessarily. Okay, remember, it all really depends. Right now, we're seeing a shift in the market, ladies and gentlemen. So what we're seeing right now is that what it was before a seller's market now is kind of transitioning where we're seeing property on the market for a little longer than typically 5-10 days, and then they're in escrow. So now the buyer has a little bit of wiggle room to negotiate if in case the appraisal does not come in at full asking. And again, I've seen scenarios and I've seen circumstances that even if the buyer released that as a contingency, is the seller, and this is again how the understanding of negotiations work. In my position, if I was representing the buyer and we had a $3 million discrepancy and I released this as a condition, I wouldn't recommend that if you're a newer agent to try to tackle this on yourself. I would ask, a seasoned agent or your broker to be involved in this and see if there's a loop and an avenue to have a conversation with the seller and the listing agent and say, look, I understand that we released this as a condition, but we were under the understanding that this home was going to appraise for a lot higher. $3 million is just a lot of money to come in on top of down payment and closing costs. Therefore, we're going to try to challenge this and just try to back out of the deal. And, you got to also understand that's a big difference. So I've seen circumstances where the listing agent and the seller will say, look, we can cancel and go after the deposit, or we can go and say, look, let's just work with this buyer. Let's reduce the price and let's work with this, because now we have to start over again with no guarantee that you're going to get another offer for $10 million. And there's still no guarantee that the buyer will even continue. They'll go through the motions and cancel. So why don't we stick with this buyer and then just finish it and work with them? And I've seen dynamics that way where, they end up coming down. Maybe they can even meet halfway point, okay? Meaning that if it's 3 million, the buyer will come up 1.5 and the seller will go down 1.5 and meet in the middle. And I've seen circumstances that way as well. Okay, great questions. All right, guys, I'm gonna just go a few more, and I apologize, it's already 3 o'clock. I know it's a lot of content, but the 2 pages is the most important. Maybe on our next call, I'll definitely revisit this form and really get into the rest of the contract, okay? I just wanna respect each other's time, and I wanted to stay inconsistent with the time allotted for this presentation. All right, so loan, real quick, let's just go real quick with the last couple of motions to this page. Loan terms, loan application. So it says within 3 days of acceptance, buyer shall deliver to seller a letter of the buyer's qualifying. So here's how this works, okay? If your clients happen to go and research and look at, I don't know, the MLS or any of the third-party sites out there, and they identify a property that they love, maybe they didn't physically see the property, but they just like the area, like the images on the property, like to submit an offer. They can go ahead and submit an offer without being approved yet. Literally, they can submit an offer without being approved. But the stipulation here says that in order for that to happen, within 3 days after the offer is accepted, that the buyer will deliver a letter from a lender that the buyer has chosen as an avenue that they have been going through the initial process of qualification or approval. Meaning they turn in their bank statements, their pay stubs, their taxes, they ran their credit, their ratios on income and expenses, and then they have 3 days to provide that information. So you can submit an offer today and still allow Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, by this Friday, to speak with the lender to provide a pre-qual or a pre-approval letter from a bank or a lender. Make sense? Now, it's not necessarily highly recommended, because a lot of agents, well, it's like it's a waste of time. Why would I accept an offer that the buyer hasn't even been qualified? Well, you got a lot of very high-end sophisticated clientele, like attorneys, doctors, that they know that they have the means and the finance. They want to identify a property, submit an offer before they go through the motions of going and getting a loan, because one, they don't have the time, because they're in the same industry of helping people. and their time frame to do this doesn't allow them the time frame to do so. This is why they want to identify, submit, and accept an offer before they go through the motions. And if you do have the letter, attach it here, then you check off letter of attachment. All right, loan contingency, guys. All right, this is again another one within 21 days of acceptance. Now, 21 days is this, 20 calendar days, okay? Meaning that when the offer gets accepted, so today we get the offer accepted, let's just say Robin is the buyer and Jacob is the seller. They submit an offer, Robin submits an offer, Jacob accepts the offer, and today they have the executed offer done. Today is considered 0 days. Tomorrow starts your 30-day process of the escrow. That means 21 days, 17 days, 3 days, whatever the case may be, it starts as of the following day. Now, where it gets a little bit confusing is for a lot of buyers and sellers is calendar days versus business days. And then more so when a contingency falls on a weekend or a holiday. All right, and I got to stress the fact here, ladies and gentlemen, because I've seen this firsthand where there's a lot of confusion. If the loan contingency happens to fall on the weekend or holiday, then that will ultimately revert to the next business day. So let's say 21 days falls Saturday. So the first initial day to release this would not be Saturday, it would be the first day, Monday, to release this. So technically, the buyer has 23 days to release this if it falls on the weekend. Now, you probably won't know this in the very beginning. You'll probably forget that. But the cool thing is if it falls on the weekend, in a holiday, it reverts to the next business day. That goes for physical inspections, disclosures, and also loan contingency, and even HOAs or any city permits or anything that has to do with the city. Then that's when it also comes off on the next business day. So keep that in mind, write some notations. If it happens to fall on the weekend, it automatically reverts to the next business day, okay? Now, if there's no loan contingency, obviously, then you're gonna check this off. Even if it's a buyer that is submitting an offer that has a loan, guess what? You can also put that this will not be a loan contingency. Even if you're putting 20%, but you got the reinsurance that you're going to qualify for the loan, a buyer can release that even if they go with traditional financing. This is not just for cash offers. If your buyer has a strong down payment, the buyer has the means, very small mortgage loan versus the down payment, the bank may just say, yeah, the ratios are extremely well. There's no problem to qualify them. So to make your offer enticing and appealing to the seller, you may want to release that as a condition, okay? Very good position to know. Lender limits and buyer credits. And this is again something that I stress, which is section number 5. Any credit to buyer from any source from closing or any cost that is agreed to by the parties, okay, shall be disclosed. So meaning that anything that has to be provided to the buyer as initial credit has to be disclosed to the lender, okay? Because it's very important, especially if it's an FHA, government loan, VA loan, and some conventional loans, they may need additional disclosure if the buyer is getting any type of closing costs or fees or down payment. So if the money is coming from family, if the money is coming from a parent, the lender needs to know where that source of income is coming from or the down payment. If the credit is coming from the seller, escrow will provide the seller's proceeds and the buyer's closing packet, and it's going to say that the seller contribute to the buyers towards closing costs and needs to be disclosed to the seller. If the total credit allowed by the buyer lender allowed credit is less than the contractual credit, then the contractual credit shall be reduced to the lender's allowable credit. In the absence of separate rent agreement between the parties, there shall be no automatic adjustments to the purchase price to make up the difference between the contractual credit and the lender allowed credit. Meaning, that if it is more than what the closing cost, let's just say, for example, the closing cost is $15,000, okay? And the seller is willing to give you, and you agree to a $20,000 credit. Well, the seller and the lender will only say we can only take, up to $15,000. The rest of the money, unfortunately, would have to go back to the seller, even though the seller agreed to give you $20,000. Now, what you can do in order for you to navigate this, and I've done this many, many, many times, is you break it into segments. And this is the cool part, and this is why real estate is so fun. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, guys, that the seller does provide you with $20,000, but your closing cost is only 15. That 5,000 can go towards another platform, such reduce your rate, or it can go into helping you with a down payment. So that way you don't lose the initial 5,000, because if everything just goes to the closing cost, then unfortunately the 5,000 would have to go back to the seller. Okay. Any thoughts, questions regarding that? All right, cool. And then last but not least, let me just go quickly through sell buyer's property is better known as the COP. All right, section number 4 is if your clients have to sell their property in order to qualify, then this is where you need to check this item, section 4. Section 4 will populate the form COP, and this is the agree that the buyer's ability to obtain finance are not contingent upon the sale of any property owned by the buyer. The agreement and buyer ability to obtain finance is contingent upon the sale of the property owned by the buyer as specified on this COP. So if you do happen to have a client that needs to sell their primary home or an investment in order for them to qualify, then you must check this off. And I've seen liability, folks. I've seen complaints that the buyer intentions is not to show that they have to sell their property, will submit an offer without sending the COP, and then their property doesn't go through, doesn't cancel, and they need the proceeds of that sale in order to qualify for this purchase, then you're putting your buyers in liability, because the seller was not going to entertain your offer if they knew that you had a property you needed to sell. So be very, very cautious and make sure that you cover your rear. Okay, CYA, have you ever heard CYA? Cover your rear. Why? Because if you don't check this off, and then now the buyer cannot close this deal, then you're in breach of the contract, and the seller can say, I've been damaged. And it's going to cost the buyer now some, if not any, all of their deposit. So I caution you to make sure that you are, being very diligent in your position. All right, the next sections, and then we'll finish it off here, guys, is the addendums and advisory, section number 5. If for any reason your offer does not get considered, you can always ask the listing agent, hey, Robin, I understand that our offer is not accepted, but we would like to be on a backup offer. And say Robin says, yeah, by all means, you can be on a backup offer. Send me the BOU. And if they send you the BOU, that's confirmation, whatever position you're in, if you're on position 1 or position 2 or position 3. So make sure that if you are in a position of backup offer, that you are included with this addendum. You just check it off and say, look, we're submitting the offer. We understand that we are in a backup offer, but here is the offer that we are going to submit with the BUO, okay? If the property falls on a septic tank, which is very rare here in LA County, usually up in the high deserts, we see that, then you check off septic tank. Short sales, we're not seeing too many short sales, but if it's a short sale, then you put that. If it's a probate trust short sale, then you're going to check off section B as in boy. If there's an addendum that you need to add or include, then obviously you're going to include the addendum to that as well. If it's a probate with court confirmation, then you're going to be asked to check the court confirmation. Any other specific forms that you want to attach, then you're going to click here, and then you're going to say what specific forms The buyer inspection advisory is already automatically included, so it will populate with the offer itself. The state buyer and seller advisory is really not necessary because that's part of the seller disclosures, and the sellers will provide you with that disclosure once your offer gets accepted. If the property is an REO, real estate owned, means that it's been bank foreclosed, the bank owns the property, then you must provide the REO advisory form as part of this offer and condition. If there's any additional form, any additional language that you want, let's say that you are a licensed real estate agent and you want to buy an investment property, or maybe you want to buy a primary home, you must disclose that you are a licensed agent, okay, as the principal as well in the purchase. You're going to put here that I am a licensed real estate licensed in the state of California as buying it as my own principal residence or as an investment. You must disclose that as well. Because if you don't disclose that, the seller can come back and say, hey, you know, you didn't disclose you were an agent, and I feel like I was forced to sell it to you for a lot cheaper. If I would have known you were a real estate agent and savvy, I probably would have not sold it to you. But if you disclose that from the very beginning, guess what? Then you're locked in and you're secured. Okay, so I definitely recommend that if you are put yourself in that position. All right, so the next is the 7 allocation of costs, inspection reports, and certificates. Unless otherwise agreed, you know, this is again very important. Seller always takes care of the natural hazard disclosures. Okay, now you can put here and can click here, who is the companies that you use. You can ask, you know, put in, you know, my NHD, Snap NHD, America Home Shields, Disclosure Source, or you can have your own NHD company provider and put that as part of it. Now, and I'm going to leave it with that because I know I'm going a little over my time, guys, and I want to respect your time here. But rest assured, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and ask me those questions. But here's the bottom when it comes to these allocation of costs and the importance. You know, the less you put, the better, because remember, this form is not just being seen by the other agent, by the seller, by escrow, but it's also being seen by the lender. A lender gets a copy of this form. And the more you put in, it gives the underwriter more ammunition to dissect and get more information out of the buyer and the seller. So I caution you, the less the better, meaning don't go putting in termite in here. You already have the right to do termite inspection as part of the buyer's due diligence. But when you put it on here, then what you're saying is that you're asking the lender to say, okay, it looks like the buyer requested a termite. Let me ask that as part of the condition, because those are conditions that the underwriter may ultimately tell you, I need to see it. And if the termite is substantial damages, you know, $5,000, $10,000, buyer and seller may not agree to it, but that also may alter your position. Meaning that even though the buyer and the seller agree not to do the termite, the buyer's lender may say, no, you know, we got a copy of that termite and it's severe. We will not loan on this because of the severity of this termite. Therefore, we're going to ask that that be part of the condition. And guess what? The buyer may be liable to cough up the money to do so, or the seller, and that may also kill the deal. So I caution you, the less, the better. The more you're exposing the buyer. Now, remember, the buyer has their time frame to do all inspections, home inspections, roof inspections, chimney inspections, electrical, foundation, plumbing, water. I mean, anything and everything regarding the property. Okay, there's another form, the I think it's called a WFI form that allows, you know, all these different inspections to be done. You know, looking at the sewer line, you know, with the camera and seeing if the sewer line is clear, or does it have roots in there that maybe we need to jet clean it or something. So again, there's all these inspections that the buyer can do, but when you put it on the offer, what you're showing is also the underwriter to ask additional and pick and say, hey, I want to see that termite inspection, or that home inspection. So I advise you to not to put much information on here if not necessary, okay? And with that, guys, I will leave it for now. I know there's a lot more information. Any additional questions? Okay, cool. All right, again, I'm gonna go ahead and put in my email address. If you do have any questions, guys, by all means. Yes.
One question. How do you, I went to play with those forms before. It seems like you have to enter information in there before you can download it. I wanted to download it just to have a copy, but I couldn't seem to download it without putting in information. It was kind of complicated with the form.
It's not complicated. All you have to do is you can go, and I can show you real quick. Let's just say that you have a blank one, right?
Right.
All right. Can you see my, no, you can't.
No.
That's why I'm over here thinking that you can see it. So let me share my computer. Let me go to this, share. Okay, you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So right here, when you go, and this is my desktop version, but you can also do it on your online version. So if you go to print, you can go down where it says print sample. And then when you print sample, then you do not have to put any information.
Got it.
You don't have to put address, names, or anything. It'll just print a clear copy of it as a sample.
Okay.
Okay. Or what you can do is just Mickey Mouse it and put, you know, I've done where I'll put, this as an example, guys. I know I put all this information here, but sometimes it just, I don't even know what this is called, a little, here. When you do this, that'll also trick the system to think that there's information on it, okay? And then that'll allow you to print it as well.
Got it.
And that's all you need, and then it'll populate it. But the best way is obviously go to print, go to sample, and then that'll print up a sample for you. Okay? Any other questions?
Thanks, Simon. Good, great class.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mark. All right, guys. Well, that concludes our class for today. I appreciate all of you for being and hanging out with me for about an hour and 15 minutes. If you have any questions, I did include my email on there, so feel free to ask questions, okay? Thanks again. Have a great afternoon. Be safe out there. Bye for now.
Bye.